son wrapped me in a hug and said with a grin, "Enjoying that $5,000 a month, Mom?" I froze. "Son, I'm working 2 jobs," I whispered. Across the table, my daughter-in-law went rigid, the color draining from her face. "Hi, I'm Doreen. I'm 65. And I thought life had already thrown every challenge my way, but I was wrong. What happened at my son's holiday gathering shattered everything I believed about my family in a single moment. The celebration was exactly what I expected from Boyd and his wife, Edna. Dazzling, expensive, and just a little cold. Their house glittered with marble counters and crystal lights, while I stood off to the side in my best bargain rack dress, sore from a double shift, morning office cleaning followed by 8 hours at the grocery store. Boyd looked every inch the successful tech founder. Tall, confident, holding a glass of rare whiskey. My heart still swelled with pride. I'd sacrificed so much to help him reach this life. Edna drifted through the guests like royalty, flawless and perfectly composed. But there was always a chill in her eyes when she glanced my way. When Boyd finally approached me, his smile seemed almost rehearsed. "You look great, Mom," he said warmly, then added with a teasing edge, "Glad you're enjoying those monthly deposits." I blinked. "Deposits? What deposits?" "The $5,000 I've been sending you every month for 3 years, he replied, suddenly uneasy. My stomach dropped. "Boyd, I never received a cent. I'm cleaning offices at dawn and ringing groceries at night just to pay rent." The music and chatter seemed to grow louder around us. Boyd's face drained of color. "That's impossible. Edna helped set up the transfers. She said you were too proud to admit you needed help." We both turned toward Edna. She stood near the tree, a canapé forgotten in her hand, staring at us as if she'd seen a ghost. Her carefully polished smile collapsed, and she struggled to breathe. Pure panic, not food, caught in her throat. In that instant, I understood. 3 years of lies. 3 years of stolen support. 3 years of watching me struggle while she lived in comfort. Guests began to notice the commotion as the truth silently unwrapped itself under the glittering lights. Someone asked if they should call a doctor, but all I could think about was the mortgage payment I'd missed last month, the prescription I couldn't afford to refill, the nights I'd gone to bed hungry so I could keep a roof over my head. "The money," I whispered to Boyd as he tried to help his wife catch her breath. "Where did you send the money?" He looked up, confusion shadowing his face. "To your account, the one Edna set up for you. She said it would be easier for you to manage, that you might have trouble keeping track of finances as you got older." Edna had stopped choking, but her eyes were still wide with fear. She knew I knew. Her perfect world was about to crack wide open. Something cold settled inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just a sharp, crystal-clear realization of how deeply I'd been betrayed by the 2 people who should have cared for me most. The party kept going. Laughter suddenly sounded hollow. The glittering lights seemed dimmer. I understood then that this beautiful home, this glittering Christmas celebration, was built partly on money meant to keep me from working myself into the ground at 65. Edna finally straightened, smoothing her elegant dress. But her hands trembled, and when her eyes met mine, I saw something new. She was afraid of me. For the first time in 3 years of endless shifts and quiet sacrifice, I felt something stronger than exhaustion. I felt power. As I stood in that lavish room, memories of Boyd as a little boy came rushing back. It's cruel how the mind works. In the darkest moments, it reminds you of everything you've lost. I was 32 when my husband, Robert, died of a sudden heart attack at just 35. One minute, he was laughing at breakfast with 5-year-old Boyd, and the next he was gone. No warning, no chance to prepare. Those first months were the hardest of my life. Boyd woke up crying for his daddy every night, and I'd hold him close in our tiny apartment, both of us grieving. I'll never forget the evening he looked up with those big brown eyes, the same eyes now filled with distance, and asked when Daddy was coming home. When Daddy's not coming home, sweetheart, I whispered through my own tears. But Mommy's here. Mommy will always be here. And I was. I kept that promise. I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Cleaning offices before dawn, waiting tables at a diner during the day, and sewing late at night after Boyd went to bed. My fingers were always pricked and swollen. My back ached constantly, and I survived on 4 hours of sleep. But Boyd never knew how tight things were. When he wanted to join Little League, I sold my wedding ring to pay for equipment and fees. When he needed new school clothes, I wore the same 3 outfits for years so he could have what his classmates had. When he got sick, I pulled double shifts to cover doctor visits because we couldn't afford insurance. I remember the night he brought home a field trip form for the Science Museum. The fee was $25. I had 12 to my name and rent due in 3 days. After he fell asleep, I walked 6 blocks to a pawn shop and sold my mother's necklace, my last piece of family jewelry, for $30. Boyd went on that trip and never knew what it cost me. High school brought bigger dreams and higher costs. Boyd was brilliant, eager to join debate, computer club, and the academic decathlon. Each activity meant more money I didn't have, but I found a way. Taking extra shifts, taking out loans I couldn't afford, even buying him a computer when he showed an interest in programming. I worked every Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve for overtime pay so he could have the calculator for advanced math, the chemistry set he wanted, the clothes that helped him fit in with wealthier classmates. College nearly broke me. Boyd earned a partial scholarship to a top university, but room, board, and fees still added up to $30,000 a year. I took out a second mortgage on the tiny house I fought so hard to buy and worked every hour I could find. I aged a decade in those 4 years. My hair had turned completely gray. Years of physical labor left my joints aching, and constant stress pushed my blood pressure sky high. But every time Boyd called to share his grades, his internships, his big plans, I felt it was all worth it. He graduated summa cum laude in computer science and landed a job at a tech startup that made him a millionaire within a few short years. I cried at his graduation, proud not only of his success, but that every sacrifice had finally paid off. Then things began to change. Boyd moved across the country. Our calls grew infrequent. Busy, he'd say, important meetings, major projects, endless networking. I told myself it was natural. He was building the career I'd always hoped for him. Then he met Edna. From the first handshake, I sensed her cool assessment. She never said anything unkind outright. She didn't need to. Her eyes flicked over my worn clothes, my work-roughened hands, the tiny house with outdated furniture. I could almost hear the calculations in her mind, weighing my worth and finding me lacking. Soon Boyd's visits became rare. Each planned trip home ended with a work emergency or a social event Edna considered more important. When I called, she answered with polite detachment. "He's in a meeting," or "He's overwhelmed right now. Try next week." Eventually, the call stopped altogether. Expensive gifts arrived instead, silk scarves, electronics I didn't know how to use, but no real conversation, no questions about how I was holding up. I told myself it was simply how life goes. Children grow up, create their own families. My job as a mother was done, but standing in their mansion that Christmas, staring at crystal chandeliers and marble floors, a different truth cut through me. I thought of every meal I'd skipped so Boyd could eat, every double shift that paid for his opportunities. None of it had taught him what caring for family really means. Edna had convinced him my struggles were my own fault, that helping me would be charity instead of love. While I scrubbed floors and stood on aching feet 14 hours a day at 65, they lived in effortless comfort, believing I'd been receiving money that never reached me. The worst part wasn't the theft. It was realizing that the little boy I'd held through nightmares, the young man I'd championed through every challenge, had let himself forget me. Watching Edna avoid my eyes, something inside me hardened. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what Boyd needed. I was thinking about what I needed. The days after that Christmas party blurred together in tense silence and heavy conversations. Boyd insisted on driving me home that night. In the glow of his luxury car's dashboard, his face was pale and drawn. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. "Mom, I swear I had no idea," he said, voice trembling. "I've been sending that money every single month, $5,000, to the account Edna set up for you." I nodded, too drained to say much. "I believe you, sweetheart. But we have to find out what happened." 3 days later, Boyd called again, his voice sharp with anger I hadn't heard in years. Can I come over? We need to talk. When he arrived, he looked as if he hadn't slept, hair unkempt, clothes wrinkled, eyes haunted like the little boy who once ran to me when he was hurt. We need to talk in cop, he repeated, dropping a thick folder of papers onto my worn coffee table. I poured coffee into my 2 mismatched mugs, the only ones left after I'd sold dishes last year to cover a car repair. Boyd spread out bank statements and transfer records, his finger trembling as he pointed. Here, he said, voice tight with controlled fury. This is the account I've been sending money to for 3 years. Look at the name. I leaned in, heart pounding, squinting at the small print. The account was in my name, Doreen Elizabeth Crawford, but the address printed beneath it made me pause. It wasn't my duplex on Maple Street. That's not my address, I said slowly. I've never even seen this account before. Boyd's jaw tightened. That address belongs to a mailbox rental downtown. Edna's been intercepting every statement. She told me you were getting older and might need help keeping track of finances. The words hit like a slap. She'd made me sound incapable, never using that word, but the implication was there. Boyd dragged a hand through his hair. I can't believe this. She said you were proud, that you'd be embarrassed if you knew I was helping. So she handled everything. I stared at the statements as the numbers blurred behind a rush of tears. Month after month, $5,000 deposited and gone within days. What was she spending it on? My voice barely rose above a whisper. Boyd opened another folder filled with credit card records and receipts. Spa packages, designer clothes, wine country trips, an elite gym membership, weekly manicures, a personal trainer, endless shopping sprees. While I'd skipped meals to buy arthritis medicine, Edna had been enjoying $100 facials. While I wore the same winter coat for 8 years, she collected handbags worth more than my rent. While I lay awake counting pennies, she spent my son's support like it was pocket change. There's more, Boyd said quietly, and something in his tone made my stomach knot. He handed me printed emails, messages between Edna and her friends. You should see how easy it is to manage Boyd's guilt about his mother, one message read. I just mentioned she's struggling and he sends money immediately. I make sure it actually goes where it's needed. Our lifestyle. His mother's fine on her own. Tougher than he thinks. Another email cut even deeper. The old woman really thinks Boyd doesn't care anymore. Perfect. She's too proud to ask for help, and Boyd thinks he's doing his duty. Meanwhile, I get the benefits without dealing with a clingy mother-in-law. But the most recent email, sent only 2 weeks before Christmas, broke me. Boyd keeps talking about having his mother over for the holidays. I can't stand the thought of her judging everything. Maybe it's time to phase out the transfers. Clearly, she doesn't need the help. My hands trembled as I set the papers down. Boyd watched me, his expression a mix of fury, guilt, and something that almost looked like fear. Mom, he said softly. I'm so sorry. I trusted her completely. I thought I was taking care of you. I glanced around my modest living room, the secondhand furniture I'd bought 20 years ago, the thin carpet, the drafty windows I couldn't afford to replace. Then I pictured Edna's mansion, all marble counters and crystal light fixtures, rooms bigger than my entire home. Where is she now? I asked. At her sister's. She left right after the party, won't answer my calls. Of course she'd run. She knew exactly what she'd done. The question was whether she'd deny it, twist the story, or try to pull Boyd back under her spell. Boyd, I said carefully, this isn't only about the money. He frowned. What do you mean? She didn't just steal from me, I said. She stole 3 years of your care and attention. You thought you were helping me, so you didn't worry. You stopped calling, stopped checking in, because you believed the money was enough. She made sure I felt abandoned by my own son, while she enjoyed the benefits of your generosity. Boyd's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to cry in my arms after his father passed. I abandoned you, he whispered. I let her convince me that sending money was the same as loving you. You didn't know, I said quietly, but as the words left my mouth, the weight of those silent years pressed down. Every night I'd wondered why my son never called, never visited, never seemed to care if I was barely getting by. I should have known, Boyd said fiercely. I should have visited more, called more, paid attention. I should have seen you were working yourself to the bone while my wife lived in luxury. We sat in heavy silence, both absorbing the full depth of Edna's deception. Finally, Boyd spoke again. "What do you want me to do, Mom?" "I'll leave her. I'll get every dollar back with interest. I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at my son, really looked at him. Beneath the expensive clothes and polished success, guilt gnawed at him. But I also saw something else. A man who believed money could fix what only love and presence ever could. "I need time," I said at last. "Time to think about what's fair and what comes next." Boyd nodded, gathering the papers. "Take all the time you need." "I'm going to make this right. I promise." When he left, I sat alone in my small living room. The evidence of Edna's betrayal spread across the table. But my thoughts weren't on the money anymore. I was thinking about power, how easily I'd given mine away without noticing. For the first time in years, I asked what I wanted, not what everyone else needed from me. And what I wanted was something Edna had never imagined. I wanted to win. 2 weeks later, I'd done my own quiet investigating. I might not be a tech expert like my son, but decades of running a household on pennies had trained me to notice every detail. I was at the kitchen table, papers and tea in front of me, when the phone rang. Boyd's number glowed on the screen. The urgency in the ring told me this wouldn't be a pleasant chat. "Mom." His voice was tight, exhausted. "We need to talk. Can I come over?" "Of course, sweetheart." 20 minutes later, he stood on my doorstep, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. Hair unkempt, clothes rumpled, shoulders slumped. Beside him was a professional-looking woman carrying a briefcase. "Mom, this is Patricia Williams. Boyd said, his tone flat. "She's a forensic accountant. I hired her to dig deeper into Edna's finances. What she found, it's worse than we thought." Patricia shook my hand firmly, her expression calm but serious. "Mrs. Crawford, may we sit down? What I have to share is extensive." We settled at my small dining table. Patricia opened her case and laid out folders thick with documents. "When your son first contacted me," she began, "I assumed this was a straightforward case of a wife diverting money meant for her mother-in-law, but it goes far beyond that." She spread out bank statements, credit reports, legal filings. "Your daughter-in-law hasn't just been taking the monthly transfers. She's been reshaping your son's entire financial world for years." Boyd leaned forward, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Mom, she's been lying about everything. The house, the cars, all of it, paid for with money she claimed was for family needs, including money she said was for you." A cold dread crept through me. "I don't understand." Patricia pointed to a series of transactions. "In addition to the $5,000 a month, there were extra transfers Edna claimed were for your emergencies. Medical bills, home repairs, car accidents. Crisis after crisis." My stomach turned. "What medical emergencies? What home repairs?" "Exactly," Patricia said grimly. "Over the last 3 years alone, Edna fabricated roughly $47,000 in supposed emergencies. A roof replacement after storm damage, an uninsured surgery, a car accident that supposedly left you unable to work." Boyd's voice dropped to a whisper. "I thought I was helping you through disaster after disaster. Whenever I worried or wondered why you didn't call to say thank you, Edna would tell me you were too proud, too embarrassed. She even said you asked me not to visit." Patricia slid another sheet across the table. Printed emails, each one a nail in the coffin of Edna's lies. "She told me you were depressed about money and didn't want your son to see you struggling." I stared at the documents, my mind struggling to absorb the scale of what I was reading. Edna hadn't just taken the monthly support Boyd believed he was sending. She'd invented emergencies, fabricated crises, and used those stories to pull even more money from him while keeping us apart. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia glanced at her notes. "Including the monthly transfers and the so-called emergencies, approximately $230,000 over 3 years." The number landed like a physical blow. 230,000. More than I'd earned in the last 6 years combined. Enough for me to retire, to live with dignity, to stop working 2 jobs at an age when I should have been enjoying a quiet life. Patricia's eyes held mine. "There's more." I wasn't sure I could bear another revelation. "Mrs. Crawford," she continued carefully, "are you familiar with your late husband's family property? The land his grandfather left him?" I frowned. "You mean the old plot-up state?" "Robert inherited it. but after he passed, I couldn't afford the taxes. I assumed it was sold years ago. Boyd and Patricia exchanged a glance that made my stomach tighten. That property was never sold per chime, Patricia said. Your daughter-in-law has been paying the taxes for 3 years. She also ordered a land survey and an environmental assessment. A chill swept through me. Why would she do that? Because the state plans to build a new highway through that area, Patricia explained. Government will be required to purchase the land. Estimated compensation between $12 and $18 million. The room tilted. You're telling me that land is worth over $1 million? Yes, ma'am. And legally, as your late husband's widow, it belongs to you. But Edna has been positioning herself to claim it, using the fact that she's been paying the taxes and maintaining the property. Boyd's face went pale. She's been planning this for years, Mom. All that time she was stealing from you, keeping me away. She was setting herself up to take your inheritance too. Memories of that land flooded back. Robert's stories of his grandfather clearing trees by hand. The tiny cabin long since collapsed. I'd always meant to visit, to see if anything remained, but life and money had never allowed it. She's been going there, Patricia added, clearing brush, maintaining the road, creating a paper trail to look like the caretaker. Can she really take it from me? I asked. Not if we act quickly, Patricia said. But she's been careful. Given more time, she could have tried an adverse possession claim. I sank back, the scope of Edna's scheme almost too much to comprehend. This wasn't just theft. It was a calculated attempt to erase my husband's legacy. Patricia hesitated, then spoke even more softly. There's one final matter. We found evidence Edna has been researching your health coverage, your medical records, even your life expectancy. Boyd let out a sound like he'd been struck. What kind of research? The kind someone does when planning for future inheritance, Patricia said gently. The implication hit me like an icy wind. Edna hadn't only been stealing money or planning to seize property, she'd been calculating how long she might have to wait. I looked at my son, the successful man who thought he was caring for his mother while his wife dismantled our lives. His face was twisted with grief and fury and a dawning horror at how blind he'd been. Boyd, I said quietly, you need to understand something. This isn't your fault. He started to protest, but I raised a hand. Your wife targeted you because you're generous. She targeted me because I have assets and little protection. This was a long, deliberate plan. But I should have seen it, Boyd said, his voice breaking. I should have visited more, called more, paid attention. Yes, I said gently. You should have. That doesn't make you responsible for her crimes. We sat in silence. The three of us, the weight of Edna's years-long deception settling around us like a storm about to break. Patricia finally spoke. Mrs. Crawford, what would you like to do with this information? We have enough evidence to press criminal charges, recover the stolen funds, and secure your legal claim to the property. But the decision is yours. I looked at the documents spread across the table, proof of the most complete betrayal I'd ever imagined. Then I looked at my son, who watched me with desperate hope and aching guilt. I need time to think, I said. But Patricia, secure my legal claim to the property today. Immediately, of course, she replied. After they left, I walked through my modest house with new eyes. Every worn chair, every outdated appliance, every scar of struggle was proof of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. But I was finished being a victim. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of real power, and I intended to use it. 3 days later, Boyd called early, his voice tight. Mom, Edna's back. She wants to meet, says she can explain everything. I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd learned the truth, my coffee long cold. Before me lay the documents Patricia had rushed through, papers confirming my full ownership of Robert's family land, with a preliminary valuation of $6 million. Where does she want to meet? I asked. At the house, Boyd said. She says it's her home too. She wants to talk there. Of course she did. Even now, Edna wanted the advantage of her own territory. No, I said firmly. If she wants to talk, it's at Patricia's office with lawyers present. This isn't a family conversation anymore. This is legal. Boyd hesitated. She won't like that. I don't care what she likes. 2 hours later, I walked into Patricia's conference room wearing the same navy dress I'd worn to the Christmas party. This time, it felt like armor. Boyd sat beside me, his attorney on his other side. Across the polished table sat Edna and her lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit who kept checking his phone. Edna looked nothing like the woman I'd once known. Her perfect hair was unkempt. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her designer clothes hung loosely, as if they belonged to someone else. When our eyes met, I saw calculation still flickering there. A woman who always believed she could find an angle. "Doreen," she began softly, "I know how this must look, but everything I did was with the best intentions." Patricia leaned forward. "Mrs. Crawford, this conversation is being recorded with everyone's consent." Edna's lawyer gave a curt nod. Edna continued, her voice low and almost pleading. "You're so independent, so proud. Every time Boyd wanted to help, you refused. I thought if I managed the support discreetly, you could keep your dignity." Inside, anger flared, but I kept my face calm. Even cornered, she was twisting the story. "And the property taxes?" Patricia asked, her tone cool. "Were those for Doreen's dignity as well?" Edna's composure slipped. "I was protecting a family asset. When Doreen passes, that property would naturally—" "I'm not Robert's stepson," Boyd cut in sharply. "Robert adopted me when I was 7. That land belongs to my mother, not us." Edna turned to him, eyes wide, her voice almost pleading. "Honey, you're upset. We need to think practically. Your mother isn't getting any younger, and that property will need careful management when the state begins acquisition. I was only ensuring your inheritance would be handled properly." "Managed for a substantial fee, I assume?" Patricia asked. Edna ignored her lawyer's attempt to intervene. "Doreen doesn't understand complex financial transactions." That was when something inside me settled, not in anger, but in absolute clarity. "Edna," I said, my voice steady and calm, surprising even myself. "Listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." She looked at me for the first time unsure. "I've spent the last 3 days thinking about everything you've done. The stolen money, the fabricated emergencies, the lies that kept my son from me, and the way you plan to take my husband's legacy." I paused, letting the silence stretch, the weight of my words filling the room. "But mostly," I said, my voice steady, "I've been thinking about how you made me feel for 3 long years. How you convinced me my own son no longer cared. How you turned his love and generosity into weapons against both of us." Edna's face went pale, but she tried to keep that careful, pleading tone. "Doreen, I never meant for you to feel—" "You meant exactly that," I cut in, still calm, still in control. "You wanted me to feel abandoned. You wanted Boyd to believe he was fulfilling his duty without ever truly connecting with me. You orchestrated our separation because it suited your plan." I stood, Patricia's documents in hand, and turned to my son. "Boyd, you've offered to fix this. Repay the stolen money, leave Edna, start over." "Yes, Mom," he said quickly. "Whatever you need." "I don't want your money," I replied, watching the shock on his face. "And I don't want you to leave your wife because of me. I don't need you to upend your life to correct what she did." For a moment, Edna's expression flickered with hope, until I continued. "I want something else entirely. I want you to make a choice, a real choice about the kind of man you want to be and the life you want to live." I placed the property documents on the table. "I'm about to become a wealthy woman. The land your wife tried to steal is worth more than $1.5 million. I don't need your money. I don't need your guilt." Boyd's eyes were a mix of confusion and hope. "What do you need, Mom?" "I need you to decide if you want a relationship with me based on love and respect, or if you want to stay in a marriage built on lies and manipulation." I looked directly at Edna, whose face had gone completely white. "Here's what will happen. I'll sell that property and use the money to live the life I choose. I'll quit both of my jobs and move somewhere beautiful where I can finally rest. And Edna, I'll make sure the people who matter to you, your friends, your family, your circle, know exactly what you've done. Not through gossip or revenge, but through quiet, truthful conversations." Edna's lawyer scribbled notes, but she looked ready to faint. "But I'm not pressing criminal charges," I continued, "and I'm not suing you for the money you stole. Do you know why?" She shook her head. "Because the best revenge isn't destroying you. it's living well. While you live with the knowledge of what you've done. I turned to Boyd one last time. Son, if you want a relationship with me, it must be real. No more transfers, no guilt-driven gestures, only genuine care between a mother and son who choose to be in each other's lives. Boyd stood, eyes bright with tears. I want that more than anything, Mom. Then you know what you need to do. I walked out of that conference room lighter than I'd felt in years. Behind me, Edna's voice rose, urgent, desperate, trying to convince Boyd she could change, that their marriage could be saved. I didn't turn back. For the first time in my adult life, I was walking toward my own future, not trying to fix someone else's. It felt like freedom. 18 months later, I sat on the wraparound porch of my new home in Asheville, North Carolina, watching the morning mist rise over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The house wasn't enormous. I'd learned happiness has nothing to do with square footage, but it was mine, purchased outright with the proceeds from Robert's family property. The state had paid $1.7 million, even more than Patricia first estimated. After taxes and fees, I'd secured a comfortable retirement and the kind of peace I once thought was out of reach. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Boyd. Good morning, Mom. Hope you're enjoying the beautiful weather. Sarah and I are driving down this weekend if you're free for dinner. Sarah, Boyd's new girlfriend, a kind-hearted nurse, treated me like family without a trace of obligation. The first time Boyd introduced her, I'd watched closely for the same manipulative charm that had fooled my son before. Instead, I found warmth and honesty, a woman who listened, who asked about my life with genuine interest, who helped with dishes because that's simply who she is. I smiled, the mountains glowing in the morning light. For the first time in decades, my life was entirely my own, and it was beautiful. I texted back, I'd love that. I'll make my famous pot roast. It had taken Boyd 6 long months to leave Edna after that tense meeting in Patricia's office. 6 months of therapy sessions where Edna swung between tearful apologies and sharp accusations. I stayed out of it completely, focusing on my own life for the first time in decades. When Boyd finally called to say he'd filed for divorce, his voice carried both exhaustion and relief. She fought me on everything, Mom. The house, the cars. She even tried to claim part of your property settlement because she'd managed the finances. Patricia dismantled those arguments with calm precision. In the end, Edna walked away with only the share of assets the law required. None of the money she'd stolen from me, none of my property settlement. The last I heard, she was living alone in a small apartment across town, working as a dental office receptionist. Not the dramatic downfall some might crave, but a quiet, ordinary life. The very life she once looked down on. I kept my promise, no criminal charges, but I also kept another promise, truth. When neighbors or acquaintances asked why Boyd had left, I simply told them what happened. No theatrics, no embellishment. The truth spread on its own, stronger than any revenge. One bright morning, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson stepped out of her house and waved as she headed for her garden. Morning, Doreen, she called. Coffee's especially good today, isn't it? Perfect weather for it, I answered, savoring how simple greetings had become treasures. Over the past year, Mrs. Patterson had become the kind of friend I'd never had time for when I was juggling 2 jobs. We shared recipes, watched old movies, or just sat on our porches in companionable silence. I'd quit both of my jobs the day the property sale was finalized. Hanging up my grocery store vest felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown years ago. The cleaning job was even easier to leave. I simply called and said, I'm retiring. Retirement. At 66, I was finally living the life I'd once only imagined. A life built around choice, not survival. I even took up painting, setting an easel in the dining room to catch the soft mountain light. I wasn't especially good. That wasn't the point. The point was having time to be imperfect, to learn slowly, to create for pure joy. My phone rang, breaking the quiet. Patricia's name lit up the screen. Good morning, Patricia. Please tell me this isn't legal trouble. Her warm laugh came through the line. Nothing like that. I'm calling with good news. Remember that class action suit against the financial company Edna used? They've agreed to settle. About $12,000 for you, and they're adding safeguards so this can't happen again. $12,000 wouldn't change my life, but knowing others might be protected felt like a deeper kind of victory. There's more. Patricia added. A legal aid group is working on resources for families facing situations like yours. Spouses isolating parents, manipulating finances. They'd love for you to share your story. A year ago, the thought of making my private pain public would have terrified me. Now, with financial independence and hard-won peace, it felt like an opportunity to turn my experience into something meaningful. I'd like to hear more, I said. After the call ended, I stayed on the porch, watching the morning light spill over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The betrayal that once broke me had also freed me. The son I thought I'd lost was back, not out of guilt or obligation, but by genuine choice. I sipped my coffee, breathing in the crisp mountain air, and felt it again. The quiet triumph of a life finally lived on my own terms. The money I'd never even known about gave me more than financial security. It gave me the power to shape my own life. Boyd's car pulled into my driveway just as I finished my second cup of coffee. He stepped out alone, walking with the relaxed ease of a man who'd set down a heavy burden. "Morning, Mom," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "Sarah sends her apologies. An emergency at the hospital. She promises to make it up to you next weekend." "She doesn't need to make up anything," I replied. I like that she takes her work seriously. We sat in quiet companionship watching the mountains. After a while, Boyd spoke. "I've been thinking about Dad," he said, "about what he'd think of all this." I smiled. "He'd be proud of how you handled everything once you knew the truth. And he'd love knowing his grandfather's land finally provided for us, just like the old man always hoped." "Do you think he would have seen through Edna sooner than I did?" It was a question Boyd had asked many times, and I understood the guilt beneath it. "Your father was a good man," I said gently, "but he wasn't magic. Smart people get fooled by manipulators every day. What matters is that you figured it out and made the right choice." Boyd nodded, though I could see he still carried some of that weight. "Boyd," I continued, "you need to understand something. What happened with Edna wasn't your fault, and it wasn't a waste. Those 3 years of distance taught us both something important." He turned to me, listening. "They taught us that our relationship can't be built on duty or guilt. It has to be built on choice. Every conversation now, every visit, every text, it's because we want to be in each other's lives, not because we have to be." Boyd's eyes shone. "I do want to be in your life, Mom. Not from guilt, because I truly enjoy being with you. I love hearing about your painting classes, meeting your neighbors, seeing you live the life you deserve. And I love the man you've become," I said. "Not just the successful businessman, I'm proud of that too, but the man who chose honesty over comfort, who left a marriage that was hurting his spirit." We sat quietly as the morning sun climbed over the Blue Ridge Mountains. I thought about the strange mathematics of loss and gain. 3 years of my son's presence gone, a large sum of money stolen, the illusion of automatic family loyalty shattered. Yet I'd gained financial freedom, genuine peace, and a deeper, more honest bond with my son than I'd ever known. At 67, I finally felt a steady contentment. Not the desperate gratitude of someone who'd been rescued, but the calm satisfaction of someone who fought for what she deserved and won. Time to paint badly. Time to sip coffee slowly. Time to watch the seasons change from my own front porch. It had taken nearly 7 decades to learn that the best revenge against those who try to diminish you isn't destruction or punishment. It's living so well that their betrayal no longer matters. And for the first time in my life, I was doing exactly that. Now I'd like to hear from you. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like more true life stories of resilience and surprising turnarounds, stay with this channel. 2 of our audience favorites are waiting for you on the final screen. Thank you for listening and for sharing this journey with me.